All right, Adam, we're back after you and I took a day off, and practice number 17 today for the Buffs, and we've only got five more of these left, Adam, before they kind of shut things down media-wise and get ready for UCLA. But what are your impressions of the last couple of days? We talked to Coach Terrell, we talked to Coach Hagan, Mustafa Johnson, a lot of running back talk, and lots of different things. But kind of, what are your impressions of the last couple of days?
Well, first off, the big question that everybody's wondering about is the quarterback announcement. That has not come yet. We did not talk to Carl Durrell today, so we're going to talk to him tomorrow. Or I'm sorry, not after tomorrow's practice. They have the day off, but on Friday. And you would think probably at that point we might hear something, just because he had said during last Saturday's scrimmage that they would name a starting quarterback pretty soon. Carl Durrell also mentioned that they started to kind of transition. They're still doing some camp mode type things in practice, but they're starting to slowly transition over to UCLA prep. So you got to get that number one QB in there and get him a little bit more reps and get him ready to go. So with the running backs group, Darian Hagan has a good problem on his hands. He's got six healthy backs that of all, it sounds like, had a good camp. And the surprise of that group, maybe the surprise of this whole preseason, has been Jarek Broussard. Obviously, he was the star of that first scrimmage, and Darian Hagan raved about him. He even compared him to Rodney Stewart, which, it's a pretty lofty comparison just because Speedy was such an effective back at CU.
Yeah, he mentioned how Jarek has that sort of breakaway speed and kind of that home run ability, and he said we haven't had that here. Really, we haven't had a back like that since Rodney Stewart. Which, it's funny because like Philip Lindsay, we see he's sort of that home run type of guy with the Broncos. He wasn't really. I know we didn't really view him as much of a speed back in Colorado. Obviously, he was very good, but he was different than Rodney. And so Jarek, it sounds like he compared him to Rodney. I thought it was interesting. That's high praise. But Jarek is a guy. I don't know how many times we've heard his name so far, Adam, and we even talked to Mustafa Johnson today, and I specifically said, hey, what have you seen out of the improvement from Alex Fontenot and Jaron Mangum? And he said, well, actually, the guy that's improved the most is Jarek Broussard. And he started talking about Jarek Broussard. So lots of people are mentioning Jarek, and it really sounds like he's going to be a key factor in this backfield. I still expect Alex Fontenot to be the main guy, and that Jaron Mangum will be number two. But I think we're going to see Jarek Broussard this year, and maybe even more so than we saw like a Deion Smith last year.
Yeah, probably so. Hagan did mention that if it's a tight game, the rotation could still go to three. Of course, he said that he's in a position where he's going to try to make all these backs as happy as he can, but it's going to be challenging for him this fall. There's just only so many carries. If there is a blowout, maybe they can get those guys in there. That's obviously a big if going into the season. But it's great to hear with Jarek Broussard, just because when these guys, especially a shifty guy like him, tears their ACL, you just never quite know, are they going to get back to 100%? And obviously, modern medicine has gotten a lot better. You see guys come back and be the same as they were before. And so it's great that Jarek was able to do that. And he's going to be in the mix as a returner as well. Chris Carpenter is a guy we've heard in that returner role as well. But, gosh, it's one of those are a couple guys that you really wish you had some more video of preseason just to be able to see it with your own eyes.
Yeah, for sure. And with Jarek Broussard, I think a lot of CU fans, those that follow recruiting closely, have always sort of compared him to Max Borghi, right? Because that was sort of the same class that Borghi was committed here, and then the story was that the Buffs kind of went after Jarek Broussard, and Borghi decided to go Washington State. So I don't know if the Buffs chose Jarek over Max, but those two guys have been compared a lot. So it'd be nice to see Jarek start making some plays. I think it sounds like he will.
Colorado fans don't want to hear this, but Max Borghi made the best decision, I think, because of that system that they run at Washington State. It suits him so well. And obviously Colorado would have been able to utilize him, but would have been maybe not quite as effective. And he would have been effective, don't get me wrong, but not quite as effective as a lead back probably in this system at Colorado as compared to even now with Rolovich taking over there. They're still going to run a pretty similar scheme.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I don't fault Max at all. I mean, great decision for him, and he's had a great career. I just turned in, all conference ballot to the Pac-12, and Max was one of the guys that had among the top four. So along with Alex Fontenot, actually. So I think Alex is going to have a good year as well. But another guy, Ashad Clayton. Obviously, Adam, CU fans are excited about him, and Darian Hagan talked about him today and said that kid can be special, and that he's just a guy that he lines up, gets him started, and says, just go out and do your thing.
It's pretty rare that a coach actually admits, "Hey, I don't really have to coach that guy up a ton." Right? That's pretty
Right.
rare. Um, yeah, it's just interesting. We've heard Darian Hagan throughout his 10 years now. He's obviously been on staff longer than that, but this is 10 years now that he's been a running backs coach at CU, and he's always emphasized pass protection. And so that's really a tough thing for somebody coming out of high school to pick up right away. He mentioned that Jaron Mangum last year had trouble, with his eyes knowing where to go in terms of pass protection, and he's gotten better at that. Sometimes it takes some time to do that. I don't know how much we're going to see of Shad Clayton, but it certainly sounds like the future is bright for him, and hopefully he stays patient with it. He's going to be the first player in CU history to wear the number 0, and so they're trying to love him up a little bit in that sense, and so hopefully he kind of stays the course even if he doesn't have a huge role on the team this fall.
Yeah, future is bright for that whole position. In fact, Hagan answered your question and said, I think about a year from now, this group could be the best one I've ever coached. So that's high praise coming from a guy that, like you said, has been around the program now for 10 seasons. And, he's coached Philip Lindsay and Rodney Stewart, 2 of the top 3 rushers in CU history. He thinks this group could be the best. So that's pretty high praise.
Yeah, and it's interesting, too, is because Fontenot and Mangum both returned, and I think it was about 1,400 yards they combined for last year. It kind of seeps into your head that this is an experienced group, but Fontenot's still a junior, his second year as a starting running back. Mangum's just a true sophomore. They still are relatively young, and you look at like a Philip Lindsay and how much he got better over his career, and yeah, it's going to be tough because Deion Smith is still on the roster. Obviously, he's not going to play this year with that knee injury, it sounds like, but that's 7 pretty darn talented backs. And so if they can keep those guys happy, then, again, this is going to be the deepest group that they've had at CU since I've covered the program without question.
Yeah. And then
not since – I mean, you got to go back to probably 2001 since they had this much talent in the running backs group.
I mean, obviously Rodney and Daryl Scott were both here at the same time, and Daryl didn't work out, but I mean, tons of talent, right? But one last thing on the running backs is that keep in mind with this situation that Alex Fontenot could still have 2 more seasons running the ball with this group, so he gets another junior year next year and could come back for that potential 6th year. So this group could be together for a long time, and imagine what this group could look like in 2021 or 2022, Adam. I mean, this could be a really fun group for a long time.
I don't think they need a running back in the current class that they're recruiting right now. I think they can pass on that position.
Right, I agree with you. Speaking of recruiting and young guys, you asked Coach Terrell the other day about whether this year's unique situation can allow him to kind of use some of those guys a little bit more on special teams, things like that. And he said that there is that opportunity that you want to be competitive and win games, but this does give you this year kind of does give you the luxury of developing as well.
Yeah, he was pretty clear that, hey, we're trying to win games here, so they're going to put the guys out there that understand what they want to do. But what better place in special teams to throw a lot of guys out there, because it's a different feeling, and it will not be quite as different a feeling this year with no fans in the stands, or I guess just a few family members. But when you get down out there in a competitive environment like that, just even run down on kickoff coverage or be part of a couple special teams units, I think does a lot just in terms of getting you comfort, in terms of the speed that the games play at this level. So as much as you can do that, and then if there's lopsided scores, I guess on either side of it, whether you're winning big or losing big, there's going to be some opportunities this year. Whereas in the past, 3 years and beyond that, you couldn't play them at all. And the last couple of years, you had to limit them to 4 games. And so now you don't have to worry about that. So that's going to be a fun aspect of this season, I think, is getting a chance to see more young guys out there and kind of get a glimpse into the future.
Yeah, and I'm curious, really how Colorado's going to approach it. I mean, obviously they're competitive and they want to win. And, Brady Russell told us the other day, hey, we think we can go 7-0. And, they have to think that way, right? And, if we were on the team, we'd think the same thing. But expectations obviously are low for this program. I mean, everybody's picking them last. Lots of people. I think the Vegas is 1.5 wins for them, and so that's 1-6, 2-5 type of season. So I'm curious to see how they approach this. If Darrell deep down believes, hey, this is sort of a developmental year, and that winning games is not the most important thing. I don't
think they do. Do you think they have that feeling as a coaching staff?
No, because I think they're competitive. But I'm just curious if like there's some of that deep down in them that they think that like, hey, there is that luxury if things aren't going well. Maybe that's what I'm trying to say is that they at the outset maybe it's let's try to win games. But if they're 0-3, something like that, maybe that mindset sinks in like, hey, let's actually use this as development. So I'm just curious how some teams would approach it. I mean, out from the outside, we look at certain teams as contenders and others as not, But inside, they don't view themselves that way.
Yeah, and I guess too, if this was year 5 of this tenure, and they're on the proverbial hot seat, maybe you can't even think like that because you're coaching for your
Yeah,
job. Obviously, Carl Jarrell is going to be here for a long time. He wants to be here, and he's obviously been thrown into a really tough situation. And so, even if they struggle this year, then he's still going to have a lot of time to build this up. And then maybe you do go that route. But I don't
yeah.
think coaches really think that way.
I agree with you. I'm just curious if there's some of that deep down where there's some reality that's in at some point. If things aren't going well, I'm just curious how they'll approach it. But one other thing we want to touch on before we get out of here is the offensive line, where Darrell talked about that, and he really kind of laid out who his starting 5 is, and really no surprises there, Adam. It's William Sherman on left tackle, Kari Kutch at left guard, Colby Purcell at center, Casey Roddick at right guard, and Frank Phillip at right tackle. If there's any sort of surprise at all, it'll be at right guard, where Cannon Ray came in atop the depth chart at the start of camp, but he's been banged up a little bit, and Casey Roddick, not saying that's why he's there, but Casey Roddick has taken over that spot.
Yeah, and I wonder too, is Cannon Ray kind of in that spot? You mentioned that he's been banged up, and that probably didn't help with the position battle, but the fact that he can play both guard and tackle gives you some versatility with that 6th guy, that first offensive lineman off the bench, whereas Casey Roddick's a true guard. Yeah. And so I wonder if that played into it as well. Depending on how many games they get in, hopefully all 7, you're going to see more than 5 offensive linemen play. It's pretty rare that they go through a regular season, being able to play every snap. And then this year with the COVID testing, you just don't know what's going to happen there. But I think Cannon Ray is definitely going to see some action in there. It was Carl Jarrell went out of his way too to really praise Kari Kutch, who I thought was maybe the most underrated player on the team last year, and he said it's a night and day difference from last year to this year. So really anxious to see how good he looks, and he's one of those seniors that maybe you try to beg to come back for 2021 because they could, obviously theoretically bring back everybody and have real good continuity on that offensive line.
Yeah, and I think Kutch could really benefit from that and might actually enjoy it because he spent the first couple years of his college career either on the bench or playing in obscurity in a JUCO, right? So he might be a guy that does that. And then I think William Sherman is the most talented guy in the line and a potential all-conference player. So, I think this line could be pretty good. And, to your point of depth and seeing more than 5 guys, Cannon Ray might be that first guy, but I think we're going to see Austin Johnson. I think we're going to see trying to think of the guys.
Valentin Sen, I think.
Valentin Sen, yeah.
Yeah.
Chance Lytle has been praised a few times, and I'm curious if we'll see him a little bit. And Carson Lee, the young center from Cherry Creek, young center guard. Curious if we'll see him. So I think we're going to see a lot of guys, at least in little bits and pieces throughout the year. So really good year for this offensive line, I think.
Yeah, they're great until they give up a sack, right? And then everybody's going to – that's a tough position to look good at. But we definitely saw strides out of them last year under Coach Cap, and so we'll see what Coach Rod can do with that group.
Yeah, and I really like, I'm not sure if you were on Will Sherman's conference call with Pac-12 Media last week, but I really loved his comments where, he was asked about having 3 different coaches in 3 years. He said, yeah, but we as a group said, hey, it's on us. It doesn't matter who's coaching us. We need to go out there and play well, and it's our job to protect the quarterback. So there's a lot of ownership being taken there. I think William Sherman stepped up as a big-time leader on the offensive line, if not this whole team. And so he's actually one of the guys I'm excited about, Adam. I don't know about you, but he's one of my favorite guys on this team, not just to talk to, but I think he could be one of the best players on this team.
Yeah. So what's your prediction, Brian? Are we getting a quarterback announcement on Friday?
I'll go yes. I like to be optimistic. How about you?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's time.
Well, let's hope our next video is talking about whoever that starting quarterback is and kind of breaking that down. But for now, I think that'll do it for today.